Our first story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil right.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think is an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to Vocal Distortion here on FM 89, your home for heavy metal, hardcore, and everything beyond. I'm your host, Austin Paulson. And I want to say, I said Chicagoland home for heavy metal and hardcore, and we are a Chicagoland show first and foremost. There's a new record out that I am very excited to talk to you about today, Exalt Despair. It is a 40-minute descent into hell. It combines genres all across the board. I mean, the riffs are pummeling. There's intricate arrangements all over this record. The vocals are insane. But I, of course, have the band with me here today. Selenoplexia here. I have Jonathan and Dan. Thank you guys so much for being in the studio today with me.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, what's up, man?
I just want to say congratulations on the record, first and foremost. The turnaround really is kind of quicker than most bands. I mean, by this time last year, you guys put out an EP and probably got to work on this record pretty quickly after. I mean, what's the background of this like? How soon after the EP did you really get started on working on Exalt Despair?
Yeah, so we were writing the record before Agony had came out.
Oh, wow.
Jonathan and I started writing Agony in November of 2021. Perhaps it took us around 4 or 5 months to write all the songs, and then bringing Sawyer in to help kind of construct how long should we be playing certain parts, should parts come back, things like that. And then, of course, bringing Courtney into the fold to really bring life into the song through the vocals. We had recorded that pretty quickly around, when did we record Agony?
That's a good question.
Perhaps around like June,
2021. Probably around then.
Yeah, and once
it was like summer, like late summer, 2021.
And once we had it recorded, one thing I'll certainly say about Jonathan and I is our favorite part about music is writing it.
Yeah.
And we're really constantly writing. So as soon as we finished recording, and when I say as soon as, I mean literally the following week, we started writing the record. I had some riffs that I was working on that I really wanted to bring to him, and we have a good creative rapport of how I can bring an idea to him, and then he can start to conceptualize, okay, well, how would this operate as a song? So we started writing Void Palace was the first song, and it wasn't originally intended on being, as long or as massive as it ended up being. But at first it was just a song, and we just kept growing it in both directions. We started with the middle of the song, and we kept growing it backwards and forwards until it ended up that being what it is. And then that got us to talk about conceptually.
Yeah. I mean, there is quite literally, it feels like a journey, right?
Cool.
And, when I hear it and looking back and, obviously if you look at the physical copy of the record, I think it certainly points that way. Like it reflects that there is some sort of like concept. There is like something to be said about, thematically. It's very cinematic. Like when I listen to it, I'm like I feel like I'm descending into like something in Dante's Inferno or something like that.
Yeah. I'm glad you say that, because that's really what we were going for. We wanted to make sure that it felt something like a cohesive, like almost like one song, like one long song.
A lot of the songs, and I mean, you can listen to them like very much like a song. Like we played, Lay Waste Our Powers, right?
Right.
But if you listen to the record, which you should definitely do, and listen to it as one piece, a lot of it just feeds into one song after the next. And, I wonder, how does that, obviously you start with one riff. You started with the last song on the record, essentially.
Right, in the middle of the last song, yeah.
So, is it kind of like that? You just keep building and bouncing ideas off of each other? You start with one riff and then just kind of expand out? Like, what makes a riff to you guys? Like, what draws you in, especially one that kind of feeds into like other parts of the record like that, I guess?
Yeah, so what'll usually happen is Dan, like he was saying a little bit earlier, Dan will come in with an idea, just a musical idea. And sometimes he'll have kind of a progression. So it's not just one riff, it's a few things and they're kind of mixed together. And then we'll sit down, and the process is like, we'll sit down and we'll start playing it out together. And we'll say, this part is really sick. Let's extend it or do something different with it. Maybe is there a way we can move it into this kind of a feel? Maybe speed it up here or slow it down here, or these parts don't really connect together. Maybe let's put this on the back burner for a while, take that part of it. And then that part that we put on the back burner sometimes may even become another song.
Yeah.
We'll say, actually, you know what? That would be a great start to another song. And given where we are in the concept of the album, maybe that's earlier in the album, because that sounds like more of a, you know, he's still alive in the concept of the album. And it's this kind of crazy death metal part.
Yeah.
Let's move it earlier. And then maybe we'll shift it to something a little bit more progressive or something like that. So it really is piecemeal. Yeah. And then we kind of expand it and it grows from different aspects of however we're feeling it. We'll say, you know, this part's been really, really aggressive. I think we need to like plunge it into something different.
That's a good point that I wanted to ask about too. Like, you know, sometimes being in extreme music, being in aggressive music, it's kind of hard to have dynamics more or less. Like, you know, and I think a lot of times maybe there's a play with tempo or, you know, tone. And, you know, how do you maybe approach a song where it's like, okay, we got to maybe scale this back and say like, maybe it shouldn't just be like a wall of sound. Like, how do you like to play with dynamics in that way? Like, yeah, it's all over the record for sure.
Thank you for saying that. It's certainly intentional. I think it's twofold. One is that when Jonathan and I had originally started this band, we were coming from more of a prog rock band that had like really very little metal elements. I mean, we brought in like some distortion and some heavier parts that were more like wall of sound type things. But, you know, we really wanted to take some of what we were doing there into a type of music that we were a lot more passionate about, which was metal. And the core idea of it is that we would really play with the idea of timing and tempo.
Yeah, that
was really the core structure of like what we wanted to explore, is how to manipulate and creatively play with those variables. The second thing I think that contributes to it is that we both come from diverse musical backgrounds, both in what we like. We were talking before we came on the show, like I listened to a lot of math rock and a lot of post rock. Mm-hmm. Jonathan comes from, you know, playing in ska bands and you know, learning drums from a reggae teacher, you know, and we really wanted to incorporate a lot of these elements of music that we're so passionate about that we think can still live within the structure of an extreme song without sacrificing the extremity.
Perfect. And you kind of noted on maybe some of your beginnings. This was a project that you both started maybe a couple of years ago. Like, what is your background? Like, how did you guys meet each other and have this idea? Like, what was the goal in mind when you came together?
Yeah, we met because we actually were working out together. And that's how we met. And we found out that we were both musicians and neither of us had jammed in a while. Jonathan moved here from Florida a few years ago. And I'm from Naperville. And I moved to Chicago maybe 6 or 7 years ago or so. And we hadn't played with bands in a long time. And I think we were both really eager to do so. And at the time, it was kind of perfect because I knew a few other people that wanted to play. And we started a band called Death to Web that we played in for a little bit. We released a record with them. And it was, again, it was more progressive rock, which is really fun. I think if there's certainly one thing that we don't like is to work with too much structure. No, we like to write music that's a little bit more free. We typically write through jamming. You know, we'll bring an idea and we'll play around with it. So it was cool to get to start playing together. But, you know, well, some other members of the band we were in would take breaks. We always would jam out, you know, death metal and black metal stuff. And it just got to a point where, one, that band didn't want to play live. It was always intended to be a studio project and we really wanted to play live. And two, you know, I think at our core, we're very passionate about metal music and really wanted to explore that creatively.
Yeah. And you can actually still hear some of the, like the post metal-y or the post rock stuff that we were working on with Death to Web influencing some of the stuff in Selenoplexia. In the EP, you could hear it a little bit in Heathen Right towards the end. It's that kind of psychedelic stuff that we do. And then Exalt Despair, you can kind of hear it in Albatross Hangs, which is that kind of post-rocky atmospheric part, which I think that we still draw on that history that we have together with that post-rock kind of music.
It definitely comes across more of like a, you know, there are bands that kind of encompass like a wide spectrum of sounds. Like, you know, you guys, it's black metal, it's death metal, you know, more outwardly. But then, yeah, some of the influences that you kind of sent me before going to the show, like I hear all of the math rock thing, and that's so interesting to me. Like, you know, how, you know, like I don't know, it just feels very natural, I guess is really what I want to say. Like it doesn't feel like you're just like, all right, here's the black metal part,
Yes.
here's the death metal part, or here's like
sure.
the thing. It feels like it flows so naturally together. So it's effective.
And that was important for us because we didn't want it to just be, we wanted to be able to move freely between genres because we didn't like to be stuck with one particular thing, like you said. So it was really important for us to make sure that if we did say, okay, let's move this death metal part into like a funeral doom kind of segment, like it's not just going to be out of nowhere. Like, let's make it make sense musically, rather than just mix everything together, which it's interesting that you say that because that what I've noticed has been kind of a running theme on people who like the album. They're like, I love how you will move to different genres, but it doesn't feel forced. It feels connected, which is exactly what we were going for. So I'm happy that that's got across.
One thing that I'm for sure excited about is your upcoming show this Sunday with at Reggie's with Goat Horror. You have Withered and Spider, and there's definitely parts on the album where I'm like, oh, this is going to be the Circle Pit part. You guys have like some like ass beaten kind of breakdown parts that I'm really excited for. Have you gotten a chance to play some of these songs live yet? Like, what's the response been?
Yeah, we have. We're not like professionally put together as a band. Like, we started playing these songs way before we recorded them. In live shows because we were really excited about it. And I'm really happy and grateful for everything that the Agony project was. But, you can imagine we were already writing these songs before that came out. So we've just been so eager to get this music in front of people that certainly we've, just couldn't contain ourselves and we've started playing them live. But over the last few months we have, and it's been really fun to play with. On the record, the songs are, clearly structured in a specific order in that, each song's ending goes into the following song. But it's been very fun to get to recreate that concept in a live setting because we also don't like to stop playing when we play live. We like to start the show. We were talking about math rock. Zach Hill is one of my favorite drummers of all time. In every project he's in, whether it's Hella or Death Grips or others, that was something that really impressed me about his playing is he did not stop playing the drums the entire show. So, we pull from influences like that, but it's been very fun creatively to essentially get to like rewrite the songs and think of, okay, well, if this song came after this one, how would we connect those two? So I'm excited for any folks that come out, we're going to make the songs a little bit of a different experience in that way.
There's so much I want to ask you, but I feel like we should maybe play a little bit more from the record. What can you tell me about A Gilded Rope? Maybe like, how does that fit conceptually into the album itself?
So like the story wise,
whatever you'd like to disclose. I know like it's a lot of it can be left up to interpretation, but maybe what do you think about it I think
ultimately it is up to interpretation, right? But for me, when I hear that song and the way I was writing it, it's almost like this kind of I want to say beautiful part where it's kind of the protagonist who's just kind of almost given up, right? And the intro of is this like kind of blast beat part with this very interesting tremolo guitar that Dan does, and then I'm kind of mirroring it with the China cymbal, and then it goes into this just kind of driving like quarter note on the bell, like death metal-y part, and then it starts moving all over the place. So Gilded Rope's actually one of my favorite songs on the album.
Perfect.
Because of that. So it's this kind of triumphant realization, the way I view it, and obviously everyone views it differently, that the protagonist that's it. Like he realizes the gilded rope, the rope is the end.
One thing that I really love about your new record that kind of stuck out to me. I mean, you really have like a once in a lifetime release date, putting it out on Friday the 13th. Totally. With that in mind, and it is very ghoulish out. We're October 30th.
Yep.
Are you a fan of horror? Do you love maybe some Friday the 13th movies, or do you have like maybe Halloween traditions that you like to take part in this year?
Love horror. Yeah. Love Halloween.
Yeah. We're both
love the fall. Yes. Everything above.
Yeah. We're both huge horror fans. We were just talking about, we just picked up from a record store and DVD shop and bookstore in Chicago called Bucket O Blood. They have a really great, particularly B horror section.
Yeah.
And we picked up a couple Bleeding Skull movies that we checked out. The Abomination and the Soul Tangler.
Yeah.
We checked out. Very ridiculous, like a couple $1,000 budget movies, but like very, very funny how they were done.
Yeah.
Also, I've been watching the movie Brain Damage a lot this year. Yeah. That's the same dude that did like Basket Case. And I don't know if you can say his third movie on the radio.
Probably not, but I have seen Brain Damage. Is it Aylmer?
Yep.
That's a classic. I can already kind of picture your taste in metal, but like, what makes a good horror movie? What do you look for in a horror movie? Does it need to be ridiculous?
Interesting. You say that because Dan here actually has a spreadsheet where he's been reviewing movies, like horror movies, and has a whole breakdown. So he's brought it down to a science. So
perfect.
He could tell you about what he looks for in a horror movie.
Yeah, I'm certainly neurotic about anything that I do, but it's I really like horror, and as you all know, when you like horror movies, especially around this time of year, people want to know like, hey, like what's a good movie?
Yep.
So I figured I'd put together. I also like using Excel. It's a good way to organize things. So I just came up with different criteria. You know, how scary do I think the movie is? How good is it? You know, how well is it filmed? How gory is the movie? Is like, how fun is it to watch? These are criteria points that I think make a good movie. And then I just created an average column at the end. That's how good it is. So the average of all those ratings from 1 to 10 is how good it is. And, you know, if you're just looking for something really gory, like you can rank the spreadsheet that way.
Yeah.
Or if you're looking for what I think is really good, like that's how it's organized. If you're wondering, I think that the greatest horror movie ever made by that criteria is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
That came out at near perfect on everything.
How do you feel about well, there's been a lot of sequels. Yeah. At what point do you think you could probably check out?
I think the Jessica Biel 2003 one was really good.
Okay. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I really like that one. And this one that they just put out last year, I think was one of the better ones, which I did not think it was going to be. Just per the last few have been very silly, where it's like, you know, she finds out that she's his cousin at the end.
I saw that one in the theater and it was a little bit, we could just leave it at that.
Totally. But this most recent one I thought was one of the better ones. But yeah, I'd say 2003, that Jessica Biel one was the last good installment of that series.
Jonathan, you have like a favorite that you like to watch?
I mean, one that I liked recently is In the Mouth of Madness.
Oh,
John Carpenter.
Yeah, a later one too.
Super kind of underrated horror movie, I think.
Yes.
It's like slept on a lot, but it's got this kind of like really cool Cthulhu-esque aspect to it.
That one, it's definitely a weird era for him, and I feel like that one definitely sticks out as like the better amongst maybe those later era Carpenter flicks. But
it definitely, and it's one that you kind of it stands out on some of his work too. You're like, oh, this seems like a kind of weird movie for him to make, and I really like it. And I think it's Sam Neill, right?
Yep,
and
absolutely.
What a great performance he does. And there's that one scene, when he's got like all the writing on his face, and it's.
Well, Sam Neill is a really low-key horror legend.
He really is.
Event Horizon.
Event Horizon is one of my favorite ones too.
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, you got like almost like half of Jurassic Park in that movie, kind of. Is there maybe a newer movie that you could recommend? Is there something recently that you saw that kind of surprised you?
There's a A24 movie called Talk to Me.
Yeah, I saw it as well.
Australia. It was great.
Nuts.
It was really good.
I'm a little older, so I wasn't familiar with these guys as like YouTube personalities. Apparently they were big like YouTube guys. And then to see that and like what they ultimately came out with is insane. And I hear they're working on a sequel. So I would love to see what that would turn into perhaps.
Yeah.
There's some cool horror shows too. So the people who did Haunting of Hill House, which I really like, they did that one, The House of Usher, recently on Netflix. I don't know if you saw that.
I haven't.
It's based off of like Edgar Allan Poe's like The Raven.
Sure. I love like all the older, maybe like Vincent Price kind of iterations of those. But so they got the newer one out.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. I mean, there's always room and things like that and things you maybe would have liked better. But I thought for a show that does stuff like creatively with different ways of expiring people, I thought it was really creative. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of like Final Destination, like the way that they were made it really creative.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's worth a watch if you get a chance.
For you as like a couple guys who like maybe darker, bleaker, maybe a little messed up kind of imagery and visual elements, do you find that kind of influences the music? Are there movies or perhaps, other sort of like mediums or media like outlets that you would maybe take in and channel into your own music?
Yeah, I'm going to unfortunately show my literacy abilities, which are poor here. But Courtney's very inspired by literature.
Oh, okay.
I unfortunately could not tell you many of the poems and books that she cites throughout it. But some references, for example, "Lay Waste Our Powers" is reference directly from a poem that's about, what the song is about, which is, just humanity's poor relationship with the earth. And so certainly literature as a medium influences a lot. Maybe Jonathan, you'd be familiar with some of the references more. Yeah.
So a bit the album, my understanding, and again, Courtney is the one that kind of had the idea on this. William Wadsworth did a poem called "The World Is Too Much with Us."
Okay.
And there's actually a part in it where we lay waste our powers, which is the namesake of that song. So that the notion that, we're looking at the world and our place in it and kind of struggling and suffering in the face of that was definitely an influence. So, maybe not necessarily like a horror movie, but definitely poems that can give you the same effect.
Yeah, evoke like a darker kind of thing.
Crushing existential, like dread.
Which, there have been, and maybe this will be a question I have for you, but one of the cool things about music like this is that, I especially love when bands kind of draw from other, forms of art outside of music. And it's gotten me to check out like a novel or a movie. Like I couldn't tell you how many times like maybe somebody sampled something even more, just less subtly,
totally.
Where I have to know what that's from. Like there's like a Magruder Grind track where it was like, oh, what movie is that? And it was like Tetsuo the Iron Man or something like that. And I was like, that was how I got into
speaking of Brain Damage, Fetid uses the Brain Damage song in their first EP. It's the beginning, I think. I can't remember the name of the track, but the beginning of it is the theme song from Brain Damage.
Perfect. That's awesome. Yeah. And then so that would like easily, if somebody was like interested in death metal or, just very extreme forms of music, and you're like, hey, this poem like was a huge, thing. Even you go back, like I read, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest because I knew Metallica wrote like a song about it, stuff like that, right? One band that definitely evokes kind of maybe a gorier kind of horror-esque themes would be a local artist that you've picked out for us today.
Yeah.
Gordon Brace with their new single. What can you tell me about this band? What can you tell me about like them in the scene? Like have you seen this band live?
We played with them.
Yeah, we've played with them. Yeah. They're actually playing tonight.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. They are awesome. They're good friends of us. Of course they're not listening because they're busy playing right now. And
they should.
Yeah, they're a super busy band. Those guys are always getting after it between touring and playing a lot locally. So certainly, if you're looking for some very heavy death metal, which you'll hear here, check out Gordon Brace. And
great guys too.
They're playing with Devil Master.
Yeah,
they're up here in Chicago
awesome.
soon. Totally. So, not to mention, if you haven't seen Devil Master, they're fantastic live as well.
Horror kind of
kind of fits right in.
Absolutely, that's awesome. Well, let's get into a little local music here. Gordon Brace, Solipstic Mastication. I hope I pronounced that right. But Vocal Distortion, FM 89. Off and warm here on FM 89's Vocal Distortion. I'm here with Selenoplexia. We were kind of talking off air a little bit. This album in particular perhaps served as kind of maybe a sonic inspiration or one of the sonic inspirations for your latest albb
for the EP. For definitely.
The EP, okay,
yeah,
interesting.
Definitely. Yeah, so we really like this album, and we were kind of saying like, what do we want it sonically? What do we want it to sound like, mixed and mastered? And this was a big influence on that. This Coffin Worm album.
Now, with going from Agony, and going to this record, you recorded at Bricktop,
yes,
as well here in Chicago.
Yeah, with Spencer Morris is the one who did the engineering and mixed it.
It seems like definitely one of, at least in current like heavy extreme music, it seems like one of the hubs right now for like churning out some of these records. Like it seems like a place that people will often go to. I kind of wonder, going from your EP. What were some of the things that you learned from the EP that you wanted to implement on this latest record? Maybe production wise, did you learn anything from that experience that you tried to implement? Maybe some things to avoid?
Yeah, definitely. So we actually recorded the EP in our practice studio, and one of our friends came, and he has a production company his little production company that he does. So he recorded all the instruments there. And then we had sent it to this guy, Floor, over in the Netherlands, this place called Gold Chain Studios.
Okay.
So I could tell you that it wasn't so much the engineering side of it, because I feel like recording it in your studio versus actually going to a studio and recording it was like night and day. So we couldn't really know what to expect. But I think what we did learn a lot was in the mixing and the mastering process, because going into the mixing process initially and the mastering process, anyone who's never done that, it's a very kind of emotional, difficult, prolonged period where you're kind of listening again and again and again and almost getting numb to hearing your own music after a while that I don't even know what I'm listening for anymore because I've heard this 60 times, to one 10-second passage.
Yeah.
So I think just kind of what we want and how we relate that want to the engineer, the sound person. I think we were able to do that better after the EP. We were able to kind of see this is what we want certain things to sound like, and this is how we want to convey that to the person to make it sound like that. Versus after the EP, we're kind of just during the EP, we're kind of like, we just want this to slam, or we want this to be hard. We want this to be like a crazy part here. Yeah. And now I think we were able to kind of speak more of the language and get our ideas across a little bit more.
Awesome. And then you said his name is Spencer? Spencer
Morris did the engineering and the mixing. Yeah.
Gotcha. And what is his approach like? Did you learn anything from him in particular and how to kind of mix or, kind of maybe place mics in a different way? Does he do anything in particular that stuck out to you?
It was interesting to see what he did because he spent a good amount of time with the drums. So tuning them up and miking them. And I was kind of, over his shoulder, like kind of not bothering him, but asking him questions because I want to learn. And so he's definitely has a lot of information on that. So it was a good experience to kind of see what his process was and what he was doing certain things for, especially with I'm guessing you could talk about the guitars because that was really interesting. We actually recorded on multiple amps at the same time, which we didn't know about really. So
yeah, we had met Spencer through friends of ours that play in a band called Lurid. That's really great. And they have members that are also in some other bands around Chicago that are great as well. And they put out a really fantastic sounding record that I would recommend. Again, their name is Lurid. Absolutely, people should check them out. It's a really great black metal record. And, metal and extreme music and, heavy distortion, blast beats, these are hard things to record as it is, let alone like particularly for black metal and having just that right sound of, lo-fi that gives it the atmosphere, but also enough quality that it drives through. And it's a quality thing to listen to. We're not trying to make, like bedroom black metal. But with that being said, particularly with the guitar, something, so one, I knew that Spencer was a great person to work with for this record because he understood that sound. Once we started talking about music, which is a really great barometer to tell if people understand exactly what you're trying to do. I mean, his depth of knowledge in music is insane. He also plays in a band, Vukari, that's really great. It's a very atmospheric black metal band. They have a few records that are great. For guitar, particularly, something that I wouldn't have thought to do is you're actually hearing 3 different amps in the record.
Oh,
and we simultaneously, so we A-B'd out into 2 different amps. So it's a Diesel D-Mol and a Sun Model T are the 2 amps that were used on the record. And then there's also a DI into a plugin that was ran simultaneously. And what he was able to do for the guitar tone is take the like auditory driving components of each part. So if you have a black metal part, you want to drive more of those components, more mids, more treble, things like that. And he was able to pull from the amp that had more of that, where in some of the deeper parts, we're able to favor the Model T more. So say, we played Lay Waste Our Powers earlier, that ending, Funeral Doom passage, we were able to favor that amp more for the guitar tone.
Sure. How long did the sessions take? What are you, going into this record? Because it does sound, without sounding robotic, it does sound very meticulous. There's a lot of planning and energy.
Yes.
You want to capture all of that effort and hard work. What was preparing for recording process going like? What were the sessions like?
The big thing was a lot of the tempo changes because there's a lot of tempo changes and figuring out how to kind of map that and practice it in a way that we'd be able to translate it when we got into the studio. So we'd be able to maximize our time there. So we weren't wasting time or money or whatever. So kind of mapping out all the different tempo changes exactly. And then going into practice sessions, like pretty much about the whole month leading up to actually getting into the studio and recording the changes. And we did it as if we weren't going to be able to kind of stop and start again. But there were parts, luckily, that we were able to kind of work on and then kind of fix later as well, which is part of the whole mixing process. But what was good was that we were able to make sure that we were all playing together at the same time, at the same tempo during the changes leading up to it.
one thing I really like about this record too, I mean, one, obviously it's very intense and abrasive, which I like, but there's also lots of atmosphere and there's some noise and there's little sounds and details here and there. How do you add those later, kind of like overdub, or like how do you apply that to the record? No,
they were recorded, excuse me, live with all the instruments.
Oh,
wow. All of that came from either my pedal board directly. So, they had to be recorded in the same tracks as parts that they were fading out of in order to, have the effect, or parts were from Sawyer also plays synth on the record.
Oh, sweet.
So while he was recording bass, we were also recording synth parts in it as well. And, it was important because, the album is a story. It's supposed to be a journey. So we knew that, there are some parts of blending some of these noises that, some things you can punch in and it always makes it convenient, but there are some things that just couldn't because it would lose that edge of feeling continuous. So some, particularly the guitar pedal components of, oscillating out delays. So say in between the third track and the fourth track of the record is an example of that.
Perfect. Now I have a very I can't really, I've played live a few times and it is fun, but I hate multitasking with certain things like that. Are these elements that you have been able to maybe work into your live set, or are you kind of maybe going for a different route when you play live? I just was curious if some of the ambient parts and the noise would be included in maybe something like this Sunday.
Yeah, some of it, absolutely, just much shorter. The first show that we played all songs from the record, it was really fun. We actually played Cessation of Reality, which is a mostly ambient track. And, just the audience didn't really take to it in the way that we would hope to. And, it was a lot more of the sound of people ordering drinks than it was us playing music. So, look, if y'all came out to see us, we want to play music that, you're going to enjoy. We just want to play it the way that we want to play it. So we absolutely will do little components of it that can help us bridge songs, but not entire pieces like it may be on the record.
Yeah. And one thing we do live as well, and recently we'll do little sound clips from things as well. So we'll have like a little, little couple seconds of something that kind of fits in with the theme of the album as well. So it's still there and it's still relevant, but and I know, Dan, you still do all sorts of stuff with the sound and the noises. I don't know. I just hit the drums. I don't have any sound clips or anything. But I know
he's so modest. He's fancy as hell on this record. I just some of the little fills he's
drums
doing.
Go burr.
Well, I'm here with Selenoplexia here on WONC Naperville, Chicago, as we discuss their debut record, Exalt Despair. Let's get into a little bit more black metal. Leviathan, the smoke of their torment, on FM 89's Vocal Distortion. Visions of Hell, Selenoplexia. I am here with Selenoplexia of Chicago to discuss their newest album, Exalt Despair. Perhaps one of my favorite moments on the record. I mean, I was telling you off air. I mean, when the song kicks in, I don't know if it's tempo changes or perhaps the chord choices, but there are songs, and the music lovers, I think, can maybe identify where maybe you hear a note and you just kind of get the chills. Like the one thing that always comes to mind is I don't know if you've ever seen I don't know why I think of this, but Heart performing Stairway to Heaven in front of Led Zeppelin. There's
oh, cool.
I hear that live thing and she hits a note that's so perfect that I will often go back and just listen to that one snippet.
Totally.
I do that so many times on this record with this song in particular.
Cool.
What stage of the writing process did Visions of Hell come from? What part of the cycle of writing were you in?
Yeah, we were just thinking, I believe that Visions of Hell was the second song.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that we wrote. And it was intentional. There's a lot of ascending and descending shapes that, we said this sounds like a descent through hell. And you brought up Dante's Inferno, which is certainly that, and Paradise Lost and things like that, certainly influences, both conceptually in the lyrics, but also musically. And, Jonathan had spoke earlier, when we had a story in mind that we wanted to tell, it did make it helped in writing the music because it sort of instructed, particularly with how some of the riffs are written of okay, this is a song about literally falling into hell and what you would see. So we wanted it to have this kind of cascading shape and how the chords are used. And it's the same series of chords that are used throughout the entire song, with clearly some deviation, but from the beginning of the song into the second variation, then coming back towards the end before that chug part, it's all the same chords that keep moving backwards and forwards and just played slightly differently to give the, hopefully the listener the feeling of ascending into hell.
Definitely feels that way for sure.
Great.
And one thing that you kind of noted off air as well is the rhythmic on your right hand, I'm sure has just been an uphill battle, but I'm sure you're going to be in tip top shape for this Sunday. I wonder, I always kind of like to ask maybe first, is guitar your first instrument?
It is.
Like, yeah.
It's my only instrument.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And drumming as well? Is that like your first?
I actually started playing piano initially, but I've been playing drums the most and consistently.
Yeah. Do you still like get on the?
Not as much. I play a little guitar too. So I think that also helped us like while we were writing songs, because I kind of understood a little bit about like that instrument. So we were able to kind of speak the same language in a way. Yeah.
Excellent. And then Sawyer, I mean, you kind of mentioned that Sawyer plays like synths as well, and this was bass. And I wonder, I mean, Courtney's vocals on this whole album, I really ties the whole thing together. Was Courtney in other bands prior to Selenoplexia? No.
She learned how to do vocals for this band.
Yeah.
Wow.
She like literally, if you hear the agony, she's probably been singing for a handful of months at that point.
Yeah.
I mean,
like
when I hear it, it's like, I feel like she's just not in a bad way. And I'm sure that she has practiced, but it almost like, you know, when I listen to some vocalists, I'm like, man, you were just like, sounds like you're shredding, your vocal cords are just falling out, but it's so impactful. And it makes, I mean, the music is already so emotionally impactful, and it really is just driven that much further with her vocal styling. So it's really interesting and impressive to hear that this is like the band that she learned how to do that for.
Yeah. And it was really important to us. Like I said, when we first started writing the Agony song, she was hanging out with us while we were writing a lot. And she was just such an asset in our writing process, and, you know, so clearly understood what we were trying to do that we really wanted her to be in. Originally, we were talking about her playing an instrument because she also has a background in playing instruments. She played guitar and bass. Yeah. And it ended up making sense for her to do vocals. And she said, yeah, like I'll learn how to do vocals for this band. And
she did. I remember we were like just practicing at one point, and she was a little bit shyer when it came to, you know, a little bit, you know, she'd never done it before. So naturally she was a little bit reserved, and was still kind of getting the being able to do it for a prolonged period of time. And all of a sudden we had a practice once, and it was the first time she felt really comfortable like coming in and actually singing with us. And she just started screaming like that.
Yeah.
And then like, I'll never forget, like me and Dan like looked at each other like, whoa, like where did that come from? That was amazing. And said, all right, keep doing that. Let's go.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of went from there.
It really, I'm so excited to see it this Sunday at Reggie's.
Yeah.
I also kind of, I mean, we picked a couple local bands on this. I mean, are there any other locals that you'd like to give a spotlight to? Maybe what are some of your favorite venues to play in town even?
Yeah, Reggie's is definitely one of our favorite venues. One, they have 2 stages that are both great, and they, you know, whatever size crowd that, you know, is being drawn, it's aptly done. Also, they have arguably the best chicken wings in the city of Chicago.
Chicken wings. I will plug those chicken wings anytime someone mentions Reggie's.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Livewire has a really close place in our heart too.
Yeah. That was the first show we ever played.
First 2 shows we played were Livewire. Cobra is our, you know, that's our watering hole. So we practice right down the street from Cobra Lounge. So we love playing there, and, you know, we appreciate everyone over there. Yeah. I will plug in regards to shows in Chicago that if people are looking for really cool, especially local artists and bands that tour that you maybe wouldn't get other chances to see, our friend Crystal with Capicola books really fantastic shows, and she just booked a absolute heater a couple weeks ago that was after our release party, and a lot of us went down there afterwards.
Was it Hanging Fortress?
Hanging Fortress, yeah, Greedworm.
Greedworm, another local Chicago
Primitive
band.
Rage.
Yeah.
There's really great bands on that bill.
Yeah, and she actually booked our first show for us. Our first 2 shows.
Before we had music.
We didn't even have like an
recorded
album.
music. At least.
We had music, and we I met her. I think she was working at Reggie's at the time.
Perfect.
And that it was like she was starting this booking thing that she was doing, and now it's been this much bigger booking thing that she's doing. And yeah, she said, let's get you on a show. And it was a couple of these like black metal bands and us.
Tennessee.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Process of Suffocation and
Dire
Hatred. And I think, you have the better memory when it comes to all the shows. I can't remember anything.
Well, it seems like it's a very, you know, right now, especially with, you know, extreme music and hardcore and metal, there's certainly a renaissance going on, and the Chicago scene alone seems very tight knit. And you kind of mentioned your release kind of celebration, I would be remiss to not shout out the good folks at Meteor Gym.
Of course.
Of course.
How was that evening? I know they've done it for a few different bands in the area, but what was the evening like, having like the kind of listening party for the record?
Well, it was the first time I left Meteor Gym with more money than I came.
Yeah, I always spend money to go there. Yeah. It was also the first time first time I ever autographed something.
Yeah.
Like that was interesting. People were like asking us to sign the record.
That's so cool.
And that was like kind of weird.
Yeah. So we're great friends with Mikhail and Bob over at Meteor Gym. If anyone listening is looking for an entire record store that caters to exactly what you like, Meteor Gym in Avondale is incredible. And it's really great guys that are plugged in, know what they're talking about, great recommendations for stuff as well, which I think is a cornerstone pillar of the record store experience, is getting turned on to things that you haven't heard before. But it was great. So we knew that that's where we wanted to do it from. We got to talking to Mikhail a couple months before the record came out, and he got the chance to listen to it, and we're like, hey, if this is what you're interested in. He liked it. So yeah, we had a party at the record store, and we listened to the record a couple times. We had a bunch of friends, some people that we met there and became new friends, came out, and we drank a bunch of PBRs, and it was a really great time. And then afterwards, we went down the street to Livewire, and most everyone who was there went over to that show. It was a great night. Yeah,
it was a lot of fun.
It's such a perfect spot, and I mean, truly, like, guys who are tapped in, they're like some of the best nerds that I've
totally. I mean, you say that, but it's kind of underselling them in a bit, because it's unreal. I was like, hey, I want something sludgy, but not too sludgy, a little techy. He's like, you know what? You could just see it like that meme where like all the math is going through his brain. You can see Mikhail just like doing all these calculations, and he's like, got it. And just knows exactly where it is too.
We have like great record stores in the area, and some of them are big, and some of them are honestly like the metal section's just like, oh, it's in the corner in the one spot. But to have a record collection, a record store that's dedicated to this form of music, where it's so meticulous and like, it is quite literally like melodic, symphonic Norwegian, like of this, like just completely out of nowhere. And I was completely blown away. And one local that I know they cover there, and excuse me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, is Saren.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about this band? I know they've been played on this show a couple times, but I'd like to hear from some other locals as well.
Yeah. I saw Saren for the first time open for 200 Stab Wounds a few years ago.
Nice.
And that's when I first got introduced to them, and their set blew me away. The intensity and the primitive aggression of their live performance. And I've since have seen them a bunch of times. I've seen them do a collab set with Midwest Lust, which I thought was a great performance. And most recently, we just performed a show with them in Milwaukee at the X-Ray Arcade. And there's a bunch of great bands on that bill, and we got to play with them for the first time. And it was really great to share a stage with them as well. So yeah, we're big fans of these guys, and they just put out a record last year that's really good as well.
Well, I believe this comes from it. Parasitic Nightmare. It's FM89's Vocal Distortion. A little bit of Wake here. Dissolve and release on FM89. Wake actually going to be on tour with Full of Hell and Inter Arma. Going to be making an appearance very, very soon at the Avondale Music Hall in Chicago on Saturday, November 11th. I didn't realize, I mean, we kind of talked about it earlier. We were actually at the same show, Full of Hell show last year.
Yeah.
The famous
Ratgate.
I couldn't believe it when he said it live, and I'm like, I was pretty close up to the stage.
Yep.
He's like, oh, there's just a rat up here. And I was like, that's weird. Why would someone say that?
On your rats was a legendary response.
Yeah. And then like the best part of it, the whole night was he went into this kind of like whole diatribe about the like, I hope you had a nice rat life,
Yeah.
I bet he was just like hanging out and had his rat life, and now he ends up here. He had this whole backstory to this rat, which that was very great.
I can't say I've ever experienced anything like that. And honestly, I thought, well, okay, maybe because Dylan's a very energetic person on stage. Sure. He likes to move around. I thought maybe did he like accidentally stomp on this thing? Like, did it find itself in the building? No, somebody brought it in the building and just chucked it upstage, which I didn't even notice.
And it would be one thing if it were an isolated incident, but we were at a 200 Stab Wounds show at Cobra Lounge where someone threw a rat as well. And then at some point, speaking of Saren, someone threw a rat at a Saren stage. So there seems to potentially be a serial rat thrower in Chicago.
Do we think it is one sole assailant, or is it multiple people?
That's a great question. I choose to believe it's one person with like a vat of rats,
like maybe like an overcoat. And
yes.
He's just like he opens it up.
He's got like instead of watches, he's got like dead rats in his coat. Yeah, that's. I choose to believe that.
That's beautiful.
There's
I
no
like
evidence
that.
of it.
Well,
for the record,
if you have any information about Ratgate, feel free to call in 630-637-8989. I love going to shows. Maybe I'd like to ask you, what was your first show that you ever been to?
No, good question.
In my life?
In your life.
I saw a Cheap Trick
Heck
with
yeah.
my parents.
Where at?
Somewhere out here in the burbs. I was very young, but it was somewhere out here. I grew up here in the burbs, and I remember I caught a pick.
Yeah.
And I was like just starting to play guitar at that point.
That's so cool.
It was a really cool thing.
So that's awesome.
Channel that Rick Nielsen kind of. Yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
First show
My first show was also with my parents, and it was Yes.
Okay.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, and they did this acoustic version of Roundabout, which in retrospect I appreciate. At the time, I was really bummed out because like I love like the drummer for Yes is awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know his name off the top of my head, but whatever his name is.
John Yes.
John, yeah, Steve Yes.
Steve Yes.
Yeah, Steve Yes, and his brother Martin Yes, who plays guitar. But yeah, it was Yes. That was the first show.
That's sweet.
What about you?
My first two concerts were at the Allstate Arena in like 07 and 08, Van Halen. David Lee Roth had just gotten back together with the band.
Awesome.
And it was cool. I mean, you drive through the parking lot. It seemed like everybody that had been waiting, since like 84
totally
was like had the loop on, and
That's
you
so
could
cool.
hear it as you sort of live.
That's awesome.
Incredible. But maybe, okay, how about first heavy show you ever
We were
went to?
just talking about Van Halen and how sick Van Halen
We were just
is.
listening to Van
great.
We
Halen.
were just, we were just on like a little road trip and listening to Van Halen.
Do you have like a favorite particular album, or is there one that sticks out to you? Maybe even a guitar moment, or
I mean that, like it's cliche, but like Eruption.
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
I mean that's so iconic.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a great. And you know what? And taking it apart from the kind of mainstreamness that solo has kind of gotten as to what someone plays when they want to set like good I am a guitar.
Yeah.
It's just so good. It's just so good.
I mean, yeah, sonically and technicality wise, I mean, yeah, you can't beat it.
It's hard to make a song that's a guitar solo and have it be good.
Yeah,
and
right.
it's like
Absolutely.
both a good song and a shredding solo.
Yeah. Going back to your question though, the first hard quote unquote show, I don't know if I saw System of a Down.
Okay.
And that was like my first, like, this is a harder
Yeah.
band.
What year would that have been?
This was, it was Mars Volta, and Mars Volta opened for them actually.
Oh, nice.
System of a Down. I think it was like 2004 or 5 or 6, early 2000s in South Florida. I saw them. I think that Mesmerized just came out, one of those albums.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a Toxicity or anything, but I remember I didn't have general admission tickets because I didn't know what general admission was.
Yeah.
So I had these like, it was like one of my first concerts. So I had tickets like up in the seats, like in this arena.
Yeah.
And I remember going, forget this. And I jumped from like the seating area, like 10, 15 feet down, like really hurt my ankle.
Yes.
I rolled my ankle.
I'm
But didn't care. Limped over to the pit. Like there's a security guard chasing after me, and like I made it in and then like disappeared.
Wow.
And then, so from then I learned, okay, general admission means I get to go stand up there and hang out and like dance around and stuff. So that was my first experience with that.
That's perfect. And
Yeah.
it's kind of the cool, like I love Van Halen, but maybe like this form of music, it's something that, it's yours, right? It feels
Right.
like it's different than a show that you went to with your parents.
Yes.
So I have to ask the same question. What's the first heavy show you ever went to?
Yeah, probably the exact opposite in regards to volume of crowd. I used to play in a band with some friends when we were 12, and one of the kid that played drums in that band, his older brother who was in high school was in a metalcore band. It was like the coolest thing. We practiced in the same basement,
Cool.
Yeah.
shared the drum kit and all that, and we would always get there and listen to them rehearse. And they used to play, there's a coffee shop in Naperville called the Fat Bean that they played at, and we saw them there, and it was one of the coolest things I had ever.
That's awesome.
To your point, I think there's something really special about like, this is music that I want to listen to. My parents wouldn't listen to this.
Yes.
And I got to choose to see this live, and it was like really like a emotionally special memory for me.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. There's one thing that I've gotten from talking to both of you is that, I mean, obviously you're into aggressive music, but you're into a lot of different things. And one of your picks, Rodin, is kind of like in the vein of like that kind of mathy kind of lots of different time signatures and stuff like that. I want to say they're from Louisville as well, perhaps.
Yeah.
They have some ties to one of my favorite bands, Slint. is really cool. And I think they even recorded this here in Chicago, which is awesome. What can you tell me about Rodan? Like, what can you tell me about what draws you to a band like this?
Yeah, that's cool that you mentioned Slint. I love Spiderland.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well. And Tweez is great too.
Yeah.
But that band in particular, it's a great late 90s, early 2000s post-rock, math rock band that has like a little, their vocals are very aggressive compared to most bands that they would fit into the same genre. But particularly their guitarist, Jason Noble, is one of my favorite guitarists and really influential. The song Cessation of Reality on our record is inspired by one of the more ambient and guitar only, which we're not going to play here. But on this record, Rusty is directly inspired by that. And he's in some other bands. He's in a chamber music band, or was. He's dead now. But he was in a chamber music band with Rachel Grimes in the early 2000s called Rachel's. They were really great. He was in Shipping News. He was in a lot of these like early post-rock, math rock bands around that time. And I think what's most inspiring about the way that he writes songs is he'll take an idea, and you'll hear it in this song, Gauge. He takes an idea that starts off very simple and continues to both deconstruct and construct this idea musically, working really symbiotically with the drummer in a way that I think enhances these patterns in regards to just being something really interesting. When I talk to Courtney and these guys about music a lot, that's a word that I think is really important, is creating something that's interesting, and pulls a listener in to be like, okay, like, what's he doing with this? And, long form, he ends up creating these really beautiful sounds off of something that will start the song off very simple.
Perfect. And I think you definitely, when I heard this for the first time and then re-listened to the record, I said like, oh, I get it. I understand it now. So Rodan, Gauge, you're listening to FM 89's Vocal Distortion with Selenoplexia. Black Tongue, The Cathedral, here on FM 89's Vocal Distortion. We have unfortunately come to the end of our show, but thank you guys so much for being here. I really love new record, Exalt Despair, which is out now. Do you have any physical copies of it? How can people get their hands on the record?
Yeah, we do. So you can buy it directly. I mean, come to the show. We'll be selling our vinyl at the show. But if you can't make it to Reggie's this Sunday, you can buy it directly from us on Bandcamp. You can also purchase it from our friends at Meteor Gem or our friends at Bucket O' Blood. Any of those places. We absolutely have vinyls, and there's cool extra stuff in the vinyl that you can't get just from listening to it digitally. So we encourage people to check out the physical copy.
Yeah.
Perfect. One thing I want to maybe leave people with is, you've already done so much in just a year's time, looking ahead, what kind of goals do you have for the future? Are there things you learned from this process that you hope to maybe implement going forward? What do you have planned for the end of 2023, maybe 2024, looking ahead?
Yeah. So for this band, for Selenoplexia, I think our big thing is just getting this music out to as many people as possible. We want to do our first tour coming up here in the near future and play, cities we haven't gotten to play yet. Creatively, we're all working on side projects that will have releases next year, which we're excited to share in the near future. And then, I'm sure in the not so long future, we'll start writing music for this band again.
Mm-hmm. And where can people follow you for any updates on the band as well?
Yeah, on Instagram, it's at Selenoplexia Band. That's where we're the most active.
Yeah, we're also on Twitter at Selenoplexia 312. We also have a Facebook and on Bandcamp as well, but it's mostly Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Mostly Instagram.
Perfect. Well, I'm stoked to see you guys play this Sunday at Reggie's with Gohor.
Oh yeah,
Spider, as well as Withered. I suppose we should maybe just play where it all began. Such a impactful end statement for a wonderful record. Thank you guys so much again for joining me this week. We'll be back next Monday with some more metal and hardcore. You've been listening to Vocal Distortion here on FM 89.